Hey folks, welcome to the Nephilim Again conference. I miss the live audience, and I'm here in my studio, and it's great to be here. And I want to thank some of you who contributed to this after the fire and helped us get back into what we're doing here. I will be talking, and even though the covers aren't quite matching up, but these are all the new covers that we've got, and I'll be speaking specifically from the On the Trail of a Nephilim series. And if you're interested, shameless plug, if you're interested at all in getting these, you can rent them and stream them by going to streaming.lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net, or if you want to actually buy the hardcover DV, you can go to lamarzulli.net. I'll also be speaking out of this book here, and this is, you can see how big it is, how thick it is, and this is On the Trail of a Nephilim. So there's a lot of material to cover. We'll see how many sessions we do. I think there's going to be 3. But again, it's great to do this in the studio, but I'd much rather be doing it in front of a live audience. My name is L.A. Marzulli. I travel around the world. I'm a author, filmmaker. I've been 12 books. Number 13 is coming out now fairly soon, probably before the end of the year. I've created a lot of different films, some of them with the late friend of mine, Richard Shaw, who passed away last year, 2019, very unexpectedly. Since Richard's passing, we've really started the On the Trail of a Nephilim series, and we actually have number 5. And this entire presentation will be from these 5 films. And folks, I'm only going to scratch the surface because I only have so much time. And obviously, I can't possibly do 5 hours worth of yak here, and it's over 5 hours worth of material in this. So let's get right into it. And I just want to thank you all again for participating in the Nephilim Again conference. So you will notice that, in my opinion, there is a hidden history which has been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world. This picture here went viral. So this gives you an idea. Right here is the original photograph of Ralph Glidden. This is the photograph I discovered. It's this one right here. This is the original photograph, and I'm going to walk in front of the camera here and just bring it up so you can see it a little better. That's the original photograph that I took and discovered on Catalina Island. The backstory on this was I had heard of a cache of records which had gone missing basically for 50 years, and it had just been discovered. This made front news of the Los Angeles Times. So it took me about 6 months back and forth with emails, and finally when I heard that the museum was trying to build a new museum and they were looking for donations, I offered $1,000. Come right in, Mr. Marzulli. So I went in and I found the picture I just showed you within an hour. Usually when you're in the archives, you don't find anything. You can spend days in archives. And I did that in Wisconsin. I spent like 3 days in the archives there and basically found very little, although I did find handwritten letters, but I digress, which I've actually used in other presentations discussing the giants. But I found that picture, and we had it analyzed, and that brings us to this. That picture that you see on your screen that I showed you from this basically was a 9-footer. You can see it here. So when we went back to the museum, this is what they showed us right here. So my picture, and we actually held the book up underneath the picture in the museum. So that's what they did. They cropped the giant out of the picture. The top picture was the one hanging in the museum. My book is directly underneath it. Those hands are Richard Shaw hands, I believe. And he's holding up the book to show the original picture versus the picture that they cropped. So when I tell you that there is a hidden history that has been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world, I am not exaggerating in belief. Why would the museum go out of their way to somehow do damage control? You would think that they would go, wow, we have a picture of a giant. And they would advertise that, and people from all over America would go to see this picture. They would, absolutely. You know, maybe they've got the bones, who knows, right? Instead, they deliberately, I'll show it to you again, they deliberately obfuscate the picture. Folks, there is a hidden history which has been deliberately covered up, obfuscated by the powers that be. And we, as citizens of this globe and as Americans, have a right to know what our true history is, and that's why I am on the trail. Why? Because I believe in the biblical prophetic narrative. I believe that the words in the Bible are absolutely true. And when it talks about the Nephilim that were on the earth in those days in Genesis 6, and also afterwards when the sons of God went into the women of earth, took wives and went into them in a biblical fashion, they produced this hybrid being known as the Nephilim. They were giants, but there's also other genetic anomalies that we find in these particular skeletons. So let's get into it here. We had the privilege of unwrapping a 1,935-year-old mummy skull. So, I mean, this is, who gets to do that? And again, this was in Senior Juan's Museum at the Paracas History Museum in Paracas, Peru. And, you know, give credit where credit is due. Brian Forrester was our go-to man. He was sort of our liaison down there. And we thank Brian for setting us up with Senior Juan. But Brian didn't discover this. But Brian sort of bent Senior Juan's ear and allowed us to unwrap it. This was in a private museum. We took samples from this, and I will get into what those samples actually were when we did DNA testing on it. I think you'll find that incredibly interesting. This is an aerial photograph done with a drone of the Great Serpent Mound. There's a passage in Genesis 3:15 that if we don't understand what it says, when we get to Genesis 6, the Tower of Babel, the 5 kings that Abraham goes after, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, then finally what's going on in the Promised Land with Numbers 13, when the spies go in, oh, we can't go in there. The Nephilim were there, we were like grasshoppers in that site, finally to the conquest of Canaan, where they basically slaughter all these people that are there. And these are Nephilim tribes that are there, in my opinion, which is why it seems, if you don't know the Nephilim, if we don't understand that, if we don't understand Genesis 3:15, then when we get up to the conquest in Canaan, we have no idea what's going on. Let's look at Genesis 3:15. And remember, Adam and Eve were in the garden. They just ate the fruit. The serpent, the dragon is in there with them. I believe it's some pre-incarnate Jesus who was there. And he basically states this. He looks at the dragon. Your seed, the dragon's seed, the seed of a serpent, the offspring of the serpent, will be at war, will be at enmity with the offspring, the seed of the woman. He, the coming Messiah, one born from the woman, will come and crush your head. You, the dragon, will bruise his heel. That sets up the entire biblical narrative. From that point on until the cross, the one who comes, the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth, when that happens, that's checkmate. As I wrote about in the Cosmic Chess Match, that's checkmate. It's over. The dragon loses. But up until that point, the seed war continues. In fact, I would even say, and I'm not going to get into it in any of these presentations, that seed war continues, although it's changed. Jesus warns us, it would be like the days of Noah when he returns. What the heck is he talking about? And of course, that points back to the mingling of the seed that happens in Genesis 6. We see here the largest serpent effigy on the planet that I'm aware of. Now, there's been new discoveries on the Golan Heights near Gilgal Raphaim. It appears to be a stone serpent mound, and it could be, I don't know. The verdict's still out on that. If it is, it's certainly larger than this one. But right now, this right here is the largest serpent mound on the planet. You will notice right here that the head of a serpent is in the act of what appears to be swallowing an egg. I wrote a paper on this a number of years ago. I'd like to thank our friend Mark Kurtzman for telling me about that. Mark was at one of our Nephilim Mounds conference. Gary Stearman was teaching, and Gary was talking about it's all about the seed. It's all about the seed. And he was talking about the seed, this passage, Genesis 3:15. He was elaborating on it. His entire presentation was focused on that, which serves as a launch pad for myself and Russ Dizdar and everyone else who was there. So the bottom line is this, folks. What we see is the serpent, in my opinion, in the act of attempting to swallow the egg, destroy the egg. And it hails back to Genesis 3:15. And why is it that when you fly a drone, 300 or 400 feet in the air, then you get this picture? But when you're down walking across and looking at the serpent mound, you don't understand really what you're looking at. See the undulations here in the serpent? Notice the undulations all throughout the serpent right there, right? Those point to the constellations. The serpent is also on an 18 and a half year, the serpent mound is also on an 18 and a half year lunar cycle And guess what? It points to the constellation Draco, the dragon. We'll get into all this in depth in just a little bit. Our mission statement is to expose the deception of the prince of the power of the air and to herald the return of the King Jesus. To expose the deception of the prince of the power of the air, i.e. Satan, the dragon, and to herald the return of the King, Jesus, the Messiah, our Redeemer. Jesus warns us that even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. So when he talks about that, I mean, that's a dire warning. And yet most churches never talk. When was the last time you heard a sermon on even the elect would be deceived if that were possible? And he's talking about basically the days of Noah. It will be like the days of Noah when I return. And in those days, even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. Folks, something is already here. We're seeing, and I'm going to just step out a little bit from our presentation, but UFO disclosure is happening, and it happens on Tucker Carlson and picked up by all the other media outlets. And UFOs are real and burgeoning and not going away. You've heard me say that. Well, now it's mainstream. It's no longer the stuff of tinfoil hat wearing people like yours truly here, or George Norrie, which I love. I was just on George's show a couple of weeks ago. But here's the bottom line, folks. It's real, and it's being sort of rolled out on Tucker Carlson. It's time for the church to stand up. It's time for you to go back to your pastors and wake these guys up who are still asleep. A lot of good pastors are waking up, but a lot of them still, I don't want to deal with that. Well, we got to wake up, folks. We got to wake up the church. It's time. So this is from the Mysterious Mound Builders. We did, and I just want to thank Mark Kahn, and he's done a lot of great work. But we changed the covers, and we're here, right? This is the new cover, so don't get confused with that. And bad, I should have changed the cover, but I didn't. I just want to thank Mark Kahn for his great work, and our new covers were designed by Darren Geisinger. This presentation, part one, will be from On the Trail of the Nephilim and Mathematical Mysteries of the Mound Builders. So basically, the Mysterious Mound Builders, Mathematical Mysteries of the Mound Builders, that is episodes 1 and 2 of the On the Trail of the Nephilim series. 2 millennia ago, a culture that is still unknown to us today, stop right there. Do you realize that mainstream archaeology created words for this? They don't even really know who the mound builders were. So they call them the mound builders, the Hopewell, the Adena. They just make up names. Let's continue. 2 millennia ago, a culture that is still unknown to us today erected thousands of mounds throughout the Midwestern United States to the Gulf of Mexico. They are called the Hopewell, the Adena, or the Mississippian. However, no one knows what these people actually called themselves. In other words, they remain mysterious and unknown to us today. When the first white settlers came into the Great Circle Mound in Ohio, they asked the natives living there, "Who built this?" The natives replied that they didn't know who built them, as these large mounds were there when they arrived. The discovery of these mounds created a controversy, as some posited the mounds were built by an unknown race of people, a lost tribe of people who perhaps migrated from the old world. Others thought they could be one of the lost tribes of Israel. The debate continued until the late 19th century, when the conclusion was made that Native Americans had built the mounds, but they had simply forgotten they had done so. Let that sink in. I'll read that again because it's so poignant. The debate continued until the late 19th century, when the conclusion was made that Native Americans built the mounds, but they had simply forgotten that they had done so. This is now the accepted paradigm. However, is it the truth of what occurred in the ancient past, or has the information been managed to bolster a particular narrative? Join us as we explore the mysterious mound builders. So it starts, I got an email from a gentleman, and he said that his family, that you can see part of it here in the picture, when he was small, he's around 5 years old, maybe a little older, and they would go out to this island called Chick Island. And it's in a lake in Florida, and they would go out there, and the family was called the Bilger family. and they would hunt Indian relics. Well, he sent me all this, and he told me that he had 8mm film that his mother had taken when they were out there. And what was fascinating about this, he sent me the film, and I had it digitized, which all that burned in the fire, by the way. I did send back the original footage to him, but my digitized copy burned in the fire in 2018. So I lost the file, basically the digital film. And I went through it very slowly, hoping to find what I was looking for, because this gentleman told me that when he was a child, they, on Tick Island, it was a lot of Indian mounds, right? They hit upon, as they were digging for relics, they hit on an ancient burial ground, and there were giants there. There were giants there over 10 feet tall, and the bones of which he saw them. Now, his mother was filming, and she wasn't interested in that. They didn't know anything about the Nephilim. So, unfortunately, all I have is his word, nothing on paper. However, we know that there were giants from other reports that were pulled out of some of these ancient mounds. So you have to ask ourselves, why, what are they doing there? And why is it that all of this is just swept under the rug? I remember talking to an archaeologist from a major university, and this woman was teaching archaeology. I asked her, I said, well, what do you do with all the reports that we have of people from all over America talking about 8-footers, 9-footers, 12-footers? What do you do with that? And she goes, and some of these skeletons measured by doctors. You know what she told me? And I quote, well, the doctors just didn't know how to measure. So a medical doctor in the 20th century, let's say circa 1910, 1911, right, had no idea how to measure skeletons? Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And there are medical doctors who went on the record and basically stated that, you know, this was a 10-footer, this was a 12-footer, this was a 9-footer, and they're everywhere. You can see here that the Serpent Mound, this is an old lithograph of it, but you can see right here, without the trees, and it's sort of a plateau that's here, and then the river is down in here. It's a high place, and you can only see, as I said earlier, you can really only understand what you're looking at from the air. And there it is, the serpent in the act of swallowing an egg. Who is the prince of the power of the air? Who is the prince of the power of the air? To destroy, to expose the deception of the prince of the power of the air, and to herald the return of the King Jesus. To expose the deception of the prince of the power of the air. Folks, these sites are global. And wait till we get to part 3, where I start talking about America's Stonehenge and the connectivity. You will see something, I promise you, that you've never seen before, and it will blow your mind. Let's go on. There we go. So this is drone footage of the Great Serpent Mound. And I just, we start rolling the footage here, just check it out, and you will see just how large it is. Great drone footage. Here is the serpent's tail in the back here. It's coiled, and then these undulations, as I said earlier, all these undulations point to the summer solstice, the winter solstice, so and the equinoxes. Well, why would you go through all this? Why would you do that? And again, it's on a high place. You remember that lithograph that I showed you, none of the trees that have grown up were there, let's say 200 years ago, whatever. Another shot of it. I've been to the Serpent Mound 3 different times. It is a highly charged site. And the reason why I'm bringing this up to you now is because later, in part 2, basically, we'll delve into what happened when Henry Groover walked on that Serpent Mound and attempted to break the power that was there. When we were there with Fritz Zimmerman the last time I was there, I've been there 3 times, but the last time we were filming at the Great Serpent Mound, and there was a coven of witches. We were there on the vernal, the spring equinox, okay? We were there on the spring equinox, we're filming, and there's a coven of witches. They know what this site is. They know it's charged. They know that the power is there. And the power has never left for those who know how to bring that power in. There was an altar originally right in here at the serpent's head. Right here, allegedly there was an altar. We actually have pictures of it. Again, it's lithograph stuff. but the altar has been removed. There was also a standing stone that we now believe, Fritz and I actually, it's in Mysterious Mound Builders. Fritz and I went down and we looked at it and talked about it. And one of the things I would like to do is to bring that standing stone back up to the surface and put it in its original place. So we're in the process, perhaps, of reaching out to the Ohio Historical Society and asking if we can do that. One thing I would like to do would be to see if there's any writing on the stone, and of course we don't know that. So when we were there, we flew our drone, and it's just mind-boggling just how this site really is and how the serpent undulates. And again, it's a highly charged ritualistic site. The mouth of a serpent, as you can see here, is open, and there's the egg, right? There's the egg right there. So the mouth of the serpent is open to this, and the whole thing is pointed to the summer solstice sunrise. And originally, when it was built, it pointed to the constellation Draco, the dragon. This whole site here that you see is based on an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. These undulations here, the winter solstice, the equinox sunrise, and the summer solstice. I mean, this is what we're looking at. It is just absolutely mind-boggling. And Native Americans, in my opinion, and also I've asked Chief Joseph about this, they didn't travel in this. Native Americans did not build this mound. When you go there, if you go there, you will see signage that state the Shawnee built the mounds. But Chief Joseph came on the record in our films and stated unequivocally, and he showed me the article from the chief of the Shawnee, Chief Wallace from the Shawnee Nation, who basically stated, no, the Shawnee people did not build or construct the serpent mound. We knew about it, but we did not build it. It was here when we got here. So why is it that this narrative is being forced down our throats? Who's responsible for it? When the chief of the Shawnee tell us we didn't do it, and yet anthropologists, archaeologists insist that the Shawnee did do it. Who's telling the truth here? When you see it, when you see Chief Joseph in the film, and his eyes are smoking, and rightfully so, because he talks about that, the injustices that were done, let's say 200 years ago, 300 years ago, to the First Nation people. And people go, oh, that's not really happening today. Oh, yes, it is. When the chief of the nation, the Shawnee Nation, stands up and says, we didn't build a serpent mound. Somehow, that's not looked at, that's negated, and instead, white anthropologists, white archaeologists insert their narrative. Now, if that's not racist, I don't know what is, and yet we're accused of being racist for saying that Native Americans didn't do this. Folks, look, Europeans didn't know geometry and trigonometry 4,000 years ago. They didn't know it, all right? They were starting to dabble in it. So we've got, all of this is laid out with absolute precision. And that we have to ask ourselves, where did this information come from? In the book of Enoch, there's a fallen angel by the name of Sariel, according to the book of Enoch, that came down and handed all this information to mankind. The precession of the moon. You remember, it's built on an 18-and-a-half-year lunar cycle. I will get into that in another presentation. Cahokia is the largest mound in America. It gives you an idea just how big it is. I've been there twice, and it's mind-boggling. Again, we look at this and we go, how did they do this? Mainstream archaeologists insist that Native Americans used primitive tools and carried one bucket at a time and then somehow compacted the soil to make what we see here of Cahokia. Well, what if that's not true? What if Native Americans had nothing to do with Cahokia? What if Native Americans were part of it on some level, but did not construct it? So we know, roughly, that there are at least 450,000 tons of earth. 450,000 tons of earth. 450,000 tons of earth. What does that look like? We'll get into that in just a little bit. So Poverty Point, which is the second largest mound. I've been there only once, with about 390,000 tons of earth. How was the dirt moved? How was it compacted? And who did it? So mainstream archaeologists want to tell us that all this was done by Native Americans, as I said, with primitive tools. But what we also see here, and this is Poverty Point, is absolutely advanced geometry. Total advanced geometry here. And this is laid out with a surveyor's precision. It's absolutely precise. And how do you do this 3,000 or 4,000 years ago? How do you accomplish this? But see, in the mainstream archaeological world, in academia and in the scientific community, there's no room for anything supernatural because everyone adheres to the Darwinian paradigm. And the Darwinian paradigm basically tells us that, nope, there is no supernatural, there is no God. All this happened just by chance. That's what it tells us. So, okay, we see this, but we can never go to a supernatural explanation. No, that's illegal. Can't do that. And if you go there, good luck trying to find a job. So something else is going on here. And then you say, well, these people had to have had this knowledge because it's there. We're saying, no, they didn't have this knowledge. We know that they didn't have this knowledge. First Nation people did not have these type of surveying techniques. They did not have advanced mathematics that we see in this site and embedded in other sites that we will explore. So where does it come from? The fallen angel, Sariel, according to the book of Enoch, gave this information to mankind. Gave the information to mankind. This is, and I coined this phrase a number of years back, fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture. Fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture. Let's move on. Fort Ancient, when I was there and I got out of the car, and I just sat, just like I did, let me back up a little bit here. When I went to the first mountain, I thank you, Russ Dizdar, I was at a conference in Newark, Ohio. Russ called me up and go, hey, do you know where you're going? And I go, yeah, I'm going to Newark, Ohio, Russ. And he goes, yeah, but do you really know where you're going? I go, I don't know. Newark, Ohio. What's in Newark, Ohio? And he starts laughing. Russ has this little chuckle that he does, and it's just very mischievous. And he was doing that little laugh, and he goes, on your computer? And I said, yeah. He goes, Google Fritz Zimmerman, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley, the Nephilim Chronicles. I went, what? So I Googled it. There it is. And my mouth is, my jaw is hitting my computer on my desktop. I just went, oh my God. So I tried contacting Fritz. He was hard to get a hold of. Like the day after talking with Russ, I was headed out to Ohio, and I immediately started making phone calls and got a guide, and it was just, anyway, they dropped me off in the parking lot at the Great Circle Mount. And I have no idea what this place looks like or what I'm in for. And I was the only one there. It was probably about 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night. It had been kind of raining most of the day, but now the clouds were gone, sun was out. Just a beautiful fall night. And I'm walking up this asphalt path. And I look to my right, and there's a little museum there. And I look to my left, and that's the entrance. And I walked up and just stood. Even now I'm getting chills. Between the mounds, the circle goes like this. And originally, Fritz Zimmerman believes, as I do, that there were dragon heads on both sides, highly charged ritualistic site. The circle mound is 1,250 feet roughly in diameter. It's got a moat on the interior of it. When I walked in and I saw that, I froze. I'm getting chills even as I'm thinking about it. I froze in my tracks and I looked at it and I just knew that this was the beginning of a whole new chapter in my life. One that I would continue perhaps for decades. And that's why we're on the trail. And that's why we're making these films. And I looked at it and probably just stared, frozen. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I don't know. And finally, I just kind of made my way very slowly, methodically into the site. I prayed up before I went in there. I realized what I was looking at was incredible. I had exactly the same feeling, overwhelmed, when I went to Fort Ancient. I was with Fritz Zimmerman and my wife Peggy. We flew the drone there. We filmed there. I want to go back to Fort Ancient because I believe it's one of the most profound sites, one of the most profound sites in all the Americas. It's 3.5 miles of continuous earthen walls. Continuous earthen walls. And it allegedly, archaeologists say 67 gates. Fritz and I go, no, probably not. I'm sorry, as Carl Teichert would say. Probably has 66 gates. And when we were there, Peggy has this app on her phone which shows us constellations. Got something in my eye here, bear with me. And so there's a gateway that is actually, I think it's in here, but I could be wrong in that. Anyway, listen, we were at the gateway because this is an old map. This was done by, I believe, Squire and Davis. So this is, it doesn't look like this anymore. There's a road that goes through it. But there were these two mounds, and this was the entrance to the site. Oh, there they are right there. I'm sorry, right there. There are the mounds. Thank you, Lord. So there are the mounds, and the road now goes like this, right through it. And so some of this is no longer here. When the parking lot comes in this area right here, I flew a drone and went this way, towards this mound, over this mound, showed some of this, and then flew it around this way. So it gives you an idea. We never got to this part in here. We never got down here. 3.5 miles of continuous earthen walls. So Peggy was standing here, all right? We were there on the vernal equinox. And she's got her phone out, and she's holding it like this and looking. So remember, she's standing here, and she's looking this way, right through these two mounds, the gateway. And right over that is the constellation of Hydra, another serpent. Right over that, directly in line, precisely in line, the constellation Hydra. You're telling me that this is just another coincidence? It's not. These are the fingerprints of the supernatural. This is the signature, in my opinion, of the prince of the power of the air. These sites were incredible. So 3.5 miles of earthen walls. What does that look like? This is an old photograph of what the site looked like. And you've got to remember, when you look at pictures like this, when this site was built, none of these trees were here. None of the trees were here. They call it Fort Ancient. You don't build a fort with 66 gates in it. It's not a fort. It's a ritualistic area. Things happened there. Was it a landing place for fallen angels coming in and out? I don't know. Another shot. Remember, try to imagine this without any of the trees. And this gives you an idea of the scope of the work. Here are a group of people standing in front of the mound. All right? 3.5 miles? 3.5 miles. It's probably upwards of 400,000 tons of earth. So when we get here, I want you to watch this little take here, and you can see what's going on. So when you go to Fort Ancient and you go in the museum, this is what you see.
Historic landmark that's over 2,000 years old. And Jack, you're going to kind of tell me it's a little bit about our Indian heritage.
Exactly.
I'm Cherokee, you're a little bit Shawnee.
Shawnee tradition, Cherokee heritage.
Yeah. So I'm excited to kind of learn a little bit about my heritage, but I'm in a garden. So what's going on here?
Well, this garden depicts crops that were grown 2,000 and 1,000 years ago by the Hopewell cultural people. And they were very simple, complex horticulturalists. Mm-hmm. They did not have corn, did not have beans. They would have grown things that we would consider to be weeds today. Amaranth, goosefoot, knotweed. We do have sunflower and squash and gourds.
Okay.
And we also have native tobacco that is growing. And when all this was built, they used very simple tools. And I can hand this to you.
Yeah.
You have the
Watch your face here.
Or excuse me, the clamshell hoe.
Watch your face.
Here.
Now what's this used for?
This would be used for gardening as well.
See that? Look at the body language there. She's going, come on, you're pulling my leg. All right, watch.
Creating 18,000 feet of earth walls here at Fort Ancient.
And that's sturdy enough to do something with.
They would have had a little bit more sturdier, but they would
Okay, they would have had more sturdier clamshells? Jack, you're making this stuff up and you know it. You're just mouthing what you were taught, and it's dead wrong in my opinion. She's going this to make these earthen walls? Watch.
This here.
Now what's this used for?
This would be used for gardening, as well as creating 18,000 feet of earth walls here at 4-H.
And that's sturdy enough to do something
They
with.
would have had it a little bit more sturdier, but they would have gone through a lot of clamshells.
Okay.
And then also we have the deer shoulder blade. The way the deer shoulder blade...
See her face? She's not buying it.
...the shaft and then wrapped with rawhide of that animal. Again, look how flimsy it is.
Yeah.
They would go through a lot of bone tools, a lot of shoulder...
They would have gone through a lot. When I showed it, I'm sure right now some of you are just cracking up at home. That's how we are. When I present this to people at conferences, they just start howling with laughter. I mean, they would have had, you've got a lot of bone tools. Well, you know, you got to kill a deer, you got to drag the carcass back, you're going to feed your family, then you got to dry the bones out, and then you make this ridiculous hoe that breaks. Come on.
blades of deer and elk and split elk antler.
What is here?
This is called the Three Sisters.
Okay.
And again, what happens is we have a mound.
Okay, so what I want to do now is show you what Jack tells us about the 3.5 miles of continuous earthen walls, right? Watch what he says. 3.5 miles of earthen walls. And this is what he tells us. This is how it was done. And we're going to deconstruct it for you in just a little bit.
So now, Fort Ancient, it's a 2,000-year-old prehistoric earthwork site. We're on the short list for World Heritage recognition right now, which means that we're going to be considered for a global destination for world treasures. But Fort Ancient itself is the largest and best preserved hilltop enclosure in the United States, 245 feet above the river, and we are enclosed by over 18,000 feet of earth walls. To give you an understanding, 1, 2, 3 earth walls. Those are the 3 earth walls right there. So we're at the very tip of the iceberg. So Fort Ancient, again, hilltop enclosure, 18,000 feet of earth walls, built 2,000 years ago by people that we call a Hopewell cultural people. They would have used nothing more than the shoulder bones of deer and elk, split up antler, clamshell hoes, digging sticks, placing the soil into baskets that we demonstrated would build no more than about 35 to 40 pounds of soil. How do we know that? Well, we've taken a trench through an earth wall right at State Route 350 and found actual basket loading of soil. So to figure out volume, you take a tape measure, measure the length of the stain, the depth of the stain. Give those measurements to somebody who got better than straight C's in high school general math. That was me, yeah. And it gives you volume. There's an estimated 553,000 cubic yards of soil at this site. Now, what's that mean to you guys? Absolutely nothing. It's your teaching. Well, and again, we are not a fort. We are a prehistoric church. The 553,000 cubic yards of soil. If we were to tear apart all of the earth walls, all 18,000 feet, and put them into dump trucks, each dump truck holding between 15 and 20 tons of soil, and park it at the Jeremiah Morrow Bridge on Interstate 71, which is about 1.5 miles away from here. Start parking the dump trucks end for end. You will end up 15 miles from downtown Cleveland. 200 miles away. That's a lot. They're saying 100 BC to AD 290.
There's a couple things here. So just to deconstruct this mound, you have 200 miles of dump trucks end to end. Did you hear that? Did you get that in your head? Go out and we're going to show you this, how absurd this is. 200 miles of dump trucks. Yes, they found baskets when they dug a trench. I'm not disputing that. But here's the deal. We don't know whether those baskets were for basically when Native Americans came into the site, they started using some of these as burials. So is this sort of like they didn't build this, but now Native Americans are here and they're interring their dead in some of these mounds. Is that basket that we see, was that used by Native Americans? Look, folks, 200 miles of dump trucks. I've been to Ohio a lot. I've been to this site. It gets cold in the winter. The ground freezes. So now you've got this small window of time. These are allegedly hunter-gatherers. All right? So how do you sustain everybody while they're building the mound? Who's out hunting to feed the mound builders? In my opinion, and I realize I'm laughed at and scoffed at by archaeologists, But you'll be laughing in just a few minutes when you see how their theory just falls apart of its own weight. I believe these are Nephilim architecture, fallen angel technology. So mainstream archaeology insists that these mounds were created with primitive tools. So what we did, I'm going to go back here again, we hired a flint napper, a flint guy, a flint napper. And this guy creates replicas for museums. It burned in the fire, okay, unfortunately. But you give you an idea how big. This is a primitive hoe with a nice piece of flint wrapped in deer hide. And so what we did is we hired a fit laborer. I want to show you this to give you an idea of just how, see, no one does this. So you get Jack telling us that this is how they did it, blah, 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 blah. But does anyone actually make a flint hoe and go out and just kind of time it, how long it takes to do one bucket of earth? Well, we did. And that's what the scientific method is about. Check this out, folks. Be patient.
We were curious to see how an ancient flint hoe would actually work in the soil around Poverty Point. We hired a flint maker to create a replica of the hoe, and after procuring a fit laborer, headed out into the field to see how much dirt could be dug, collected and hauled to the mound site.
My name is Rick Woodward. I'm an archaeologist, and I'm working with Spiral of Life here near Poverty Point. We are doing some time volume tests, some experiments. How much time it takes to move a certain amount of soil. We wanted to do that to see how the mounds were built and the time factor that it would take. I wanted to describe this hoe a little bit so you can get a good idea of the instrument that they use. As you can see, it's beveled on each side with what's called body facing. They body face this piece of flint. Then it was fitted into this handle where it was pitch. And you can't see the pitch, but inside of these wrappings, there's a dark resin pitch that would have acted as a glue to hold this in. Then it would have been wrapped in a rawhide. The rawhide would have been wet so that when it shrank, it would have held this nabaculite head in this handle, and they would have been able to use it. It's very tough. It's a very rugged instrument, and I wanted to thank Mr. Epperson who actually did this exact replica. But this is the tool that they would have used, and this tool would have been used for over 6,000 years. Then the next thing we're going to do is take that soil that we've dug out of the hole, and we're going to put it into a vessel, and we're going to time that operation to see how much time it takes to do that. Once we get that done, we're going to take that bucket, and we're going to walk a specific measured distance that would have been very close to the distance that they would have had to walk to carry this soil to the spot where the mound was going to be built. Then the soil would have been dumped. It would have been packed down. And we timed that operation.
Each truck and trailer holds 40 tons of soil. 71 one-man bucket trips to create 1 ton of soil. That's an estimate. 390,000 tons of earth to create Poverty Point. 9,750 double tractor trailer loads of dirt to move 390,000 tons. 27 rounded up to 28 million one-man buckets to create Poverty Point. There are over 10,000 mounds in Ohio alone. That's Fritz Zimmerman on top. Look, folks, you can say what you want. If you want to believe in the narrative that's put forth by modern-day archaeologists, in my opinion, it collapses of its own weight. So will they get 3,000 people to do these bucket brigades? Not so fast, citizen. Not so fast. You still have diggers, you know. And even if you got 500 people, and they're doing this, and you got some diggers and some. How long are they doing it for, and how are they compacting the soil? How are they moving it? And then who's feeding them? And how long does it take? 200 miles of dump trucks end to end, that's just one mound. That's just one mound. 10,000 mounds in Ohio, all these people did all day is build mounds? Come on. The thing collapses of its own weight, in my opinion. There is another theory. That theory is it's Nephilim architecture falling into technology. Giant bones and mound. So we know that this happens. Strange skeletons found. It's absolutely everywhere. It's all across the country. Giants in North America. We talked about this earlier. That's the original photograph that I discovered out on Catalina Island. It was taken in 1919 by Ralph Glidden. We see Glidden here, and we know Glidden is exactly 5 foot 8 inches. We know that from other people. Many testimonies here. In situ is the giant. Okay, 3 different people analyzed the photograph, digitized the photograph. They all put it just around 9 feet. So we took the man, we separated him and stood him upright. This is all done digitally. We know he's 5 foot 8 inches. We take the skeleton and basically do the same with this. At this point, it becomes very, very clear that something is going on. The head, by the way, is enormous. So we rounded it down. Originally, it was just over 8 foot 9 inches. So the 2 other texts that were looking at this thing basically said that it was right around 9 feet. So we rounded it down to 8 foot 6. So, basically it's right around 9 feet. Absolutely humongous. And it gives you an idea that giants were here. And yet, as I showed earlier, and I'll show it again, when Richard Shaw and I went back to the museum, here's my original picture right here, right? There's the picture showing the giant, very, very clear. And now we've got the picture that the museum insisted was the real one. There's Ralph Glidden standing in the excavated grave, no giant. Why would the museum do this? Why would the museum deliberately obfuscate the truth from the peoples of the world? I thought scientists were supposed to be honest. Again, I stated earlier, can you imagine? Giant found in Catalina Museum. People would be flocking to that thing. Flocking to it. Nope, can't have that. How many fingers do you see in the picture here? Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But these are all, where's the thumb? That's not a thumb. Look at this one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See this bone right here? I believe that was the thumb that should have been here. And this thumb here, the hand is like this over the arm. It might have been grasping the arm, whatever, the thumb's not there. That's a 6-fingered skeleton, and we analyze that based on the size of the bowl, an average size, and we use the former curator of the museum, John Boragina, who told us that in his opinion, this bowl was X amount of inches across. Based on that, we were able to ascertain that we had another 9-foot skeleton. Ralph Glidden, when he discovered this in 1919, 1921, he talked about a lost race that he discovered out on Catalina Island, and that these giants were 9 feet. He talked about that. Oh, he just made that up. Oh, really? Seriously? I don't think so. There it is. I've shown you that already. There's Ralph. And it's just amazing. They wrote the verbiage but below that picture in the museum is basically a hit piece on Ralph Glidden. And of course, they don't show you the real photo. In all fairness to the Catalina Island Museum, last time I was there, which is several years ago, my original photograph was back, and they actually had blown it up about this size. About this size. The whole photograph was about this size and on the wall, but nothing about my work, nothing about the fact that that skeleton you're looking at was a giant. So I want to show you something here, because we talked about the Paracas skulls, and I'm just going to show you this. This is a normal skull. This is the placement of the foramen magnum. This is normal. This hole here is called the foramen magnum. Notice here on the Paracas skulls, the skulls that we looked at in Peru. And these skulls here, the foramen magnum, is pushed almost as far back as you can. And this is why we believe that they are genetic. And that is the foramen magnum. It's completely different. You cannot move the foramen magnum through cranial deformation, cradle headboarding. Cranial deformation, cradle headboarding is when you take a child and you bind the head and you elongate it. We know it's been done before. But here's the rub, folks. This skull has so many genetic anomalies to it, it's crazy. Right there is the foramen magnum, right here. That's the foramen magnum. It's almost, if it's any further back, it's going to be outside the skull. I'll show you exactly where it sits, right there. Right there. This is not, in my opinion, the result of cranial deformation. This is genetic. And this is the work of our good friend, Rick Woodward, who's our anthropologist on our team. He did the work on this. It was his discovery, nobody else. There are other people who were claiming that they knew about it. No. If they knew about it, they would have written about it. Woodward is the first guy to write about it, talk about it, and we give credit where credit is due here. What is the truth? Notice that the foramen magnum is a different shape, okay? Different shape, and it's all the way towards the back as that's demonstrated from that one skull there. I want to show you something here. We have a new film on DNA which we'll release in the end of September. It will be episode 6 in the On the Trail of a On the Trail of a Nephilim series. It'll be number 6. And when we went down to extract the DNA from not only the Paracas History Museum, but also the Ica Museum in Peru, I asked the curator if we could see the great Chongo skull, greatly elongated, very similar to this. And they said yes. So they took us in, and you'll hear my explanation. I'm blown away, because the foramen magnum is all the way in the back. When we first went down to Peru in 2013, 2014, we didn't know any of this. When Rick Woodward came on the team, and as our anthropologist and one of our archaeologists, and Mando Gonzalez, all of a sudden we got a wealth of information that we didn't know, we didn't have before. So check this out, folks.
This thing is massive.
It really is.
What's up, man?
Oh my God, it's right in the back. Look at that, it's right in the back. So I'm going to look at this again. Watch when she turns it over. See it, it's all the way in the back. You can really see it here. It is absolutely all the way in the back. If it's any further back, it's outside the skull.
It's right in the back.
Look at that.
Look at that. It's right in the back.
That's genetic, folks.
It's like right on the occipital plate. So here we are, and we are now looking at where the foramen magnum, which obviously is right there, and it's directly right next to the occipital plate, which, once again, a normal human being, this foramen magnum would be in here somewhere. Mondo, do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I see. It's interesting too. Maybe we can get another angle. Are you ready, Rick, to change the angle? Yeah, I'm just trying to, just gonna work it on the chrome on this one. Because I want to put my finger in here. I want you to see just what the spine would look like based on
Yeah, I mean, that's all.
You can see right from this picture how far back the foramen magnum is. Like I said, if it's any further back, it's outside the skull, just like this one. And we are, as far as I know, we were the first team to actually examine that skull and notice the difference of the foramen magnum, where it was positioned. No other team, it's not published anywhere that I'm aware of, but this is the work of Rick Woodward. And once he told us about that, wow, we were like, dogs in a hunt, man, going after that thing. That's why the first thing we did when we saw it, see, the woman holding it was like, well, no one has ever asked us to turn it over. That's how you know. That's, in my opinion, that's how you know that what you're looking at are the fingerprints of a supernatural. This skull, in my opinion, is not the result of cranial deformation, cradle headboarding. It is the result of interbreeding between the fallen angelic host of heaven, the women of earth. It goes back to Genesis 3:15. It's a genetic anomaly. The ancient alien crowd will say, oh, it's proof of alien intervention. You can think what you want. Fallen angels are, by definition, aliens because they're not from this world. But see, this is why the biblical narrative is so amazing. Because armed with the biblical prophetic narrative, there it is. I know what this is, in my opinion. I know that this is one of the last vestiges of the Nephilim.
That's what the spine would look like based on
That's all wrong.
You can just see how straight that is and how light it would be.
According to the optometrist that we, right here, notice the orbits in that skull, they are much larger than a normal human being.
That is so. The normal human skull is talking about right there.
Yeah, it's very, very large. And it also makes us wonder about the cranial capacity. I mean, this is so large in here that would this particular entity have more brain power than a normal human being? And we don't know. And of course, we don't have answers to that. Wow. That's Richard Shaw. The haplogroup. When we did the testing, remember I showed you the baby? Let me just get that out again to show you. Remember when I showed you this? Right? This skull is actually this wrapping right here. This is the baby skull that we were able to unwrap thanks to Senior One and thanks to Brian Forrester. We were able to unwrap it, and we did genetic testing at 2 different labs, specifically the paleo DNA lab, and what we found there was unbelievable. The haplogroup H2A is European, as you can see here. That rewrites history. What is a European haplogroup doing over in Peru? We actually took samples from all 3 of these skulls here and had them tested. H2A is European. That's not supposed to be there. And of course, when we presented this information to our archaeologist contact in Peru, he threw us all under the bus. Oh, it's contaminated. Sir, with all due respect, you have no idea what you're talking about. It wasn't contaminated. Because if it was contaminated, then we would have gotten my nuclear DNA and Mondo's nuclear DNA. There was no nuclear DNA. There was only mitochondrial DNA, which comes from the female side of the equation. As of yet, as far as I know, no one has ever been able to get nuclear DNA. We've had leftover samples, which has been sent to another lab. They are testing. We will see if we can get nuclear DNA. But as of August 22nd, no. But we do have the mitochondrial DNA, which we got from multiple samples. We took 56 samples from Peru. Out of the 56, about 28 of them sequenced. Out of the 28, about a good portion, upwards of 20, showed European Middle Eastern connections. So the mitochondrial DNA haplogroup T2B, this is basically Syria and Turkey. This is Nephilim Central, in my opinion. We took several samples from this skull here. We sent them up to the Paleo DNA lab. It gives us a reading of T2B, which is Mesopotamia. This is Nephilim Central. The baby, like right here, which I just showed you, U2E1. 3 samples, 2 different labs. So we had it tested 3 different times, 2 different labs. They all agreed it was U2E1. U2E1. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not making it up. This rewrites history. I know I keep saying that, but it does. Because according to modern-day archaeologists, everybody came over at the end of the last ice age from where? Beringia. And they came and populated the Americas. Not so fast, citizen. We know that, yes, some came over. We know that. But how do you account for this? How do you account for haplogroup U2E1, which basically is Eastern Europe? How do you account for? You can't. Oh, it's all contaminated, because they don't like the idea that this theory could be wrong, or that maybe it's right to a point, but it doesn't account for this, and that's why we are on the trail, folks. Another shot of the so-called migration, and it did happen. We're not saying it didn't happen, but there were other people that came over through the sea lanes. Is there a bias in academia? Armitage worked at a university in Southern California, and the scientist claims California University fired him over creation beliefs. So here's the deal. Mark Armitage went up to a place called Hell's Kitchen, and he did a dig with a team, and they found a giant Triceratops horn, and he took that horn back, and he analyzed it, and he claimed to have found soft tissue in the Triceratops horn. Well, you can't have that if it's like 40 million years old. So he's promptly fired. He took him to court, and he settled out of court. Isn't that interesting? The bottom line here is soft tissue remained. How is it possible? And the academic didn't want to look at the facts, just like here, where the academics don't like this because it goes against the prevailing paradigm. There is a bias in the scientific community, absolutely a bias in academia, in the scientific community. This man was fired for even suggesting, and he wasn't talking about God, he just said, this is what I found. Here's the proof. He wrote a peer-reviewed paper, showed, right there, you can see it, it's superimposed. You can see the soft tissue. He finds it, he publishes the paper, doesn't mention anything about Jesus or God or his beliefs. He's promptly fired. How is it possible, folks? How is it possible? We see exactly the same thing today. I'll just go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. When the white coats, right, go to Washington, D.C., and they proclaim the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine in tandem with zinc, right, and erythromycin at the early onset of COVID-19, the Wuhan flu, the China virus, right, it basically is a cure. No, you can't do that. Dr. Gold goes back. She's promptly fired from her position. Promptly fired. For speaking out. How dare you speak out? How dare you go against the grain? Same. You don't think there's a bias? You don't think there's a bias? Of course there's a bias. Of course there's a bias. We were deplatformed on Vimeo, but I digress. All because, as Ben Stein says, expelled, no intelligence allowed. You go against the mainstream, and what you are, you will say this, no thinking allowed. And that's, basically that's what he says. No intelligence allowed. There it is right there. Dr. Gold wasn't expelled, she was fired. All because of the Darwinian paradigm. So you can't think in academia because this man, Charlie Darwin, insisted that this happened. That somehow, millions of years ago, and this was taken in Peru, this paradigm is global. It's taught everywhere. So somehow a chimpanzee wakes up one morning, decides and says, I'm tired of dragging my knuckles on the ground. They always have crisp English accents. I'm tired of dragging my knuckles on the ground and stooping over like this. I'm going to stand up and start speaking. So this is the nonsense of evolution, allegedly, the theory of evolution that we're supposed to believe, which is an absolute contradiction to the biblical narrative that says that Jesus holds all things together, that he created all things on heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Thrones, rulers, authority, all things were created by him and for him and through him. And he holds all things together. Give me a break. That's what it says in the Word. And in him all things hold together. We can believe this nonsense, or we can believe what the Bible says. Oh, well, that's so narrow-minded. When the scientific community shows us that evolution is true, show me where. Show me any instance of one entity, just one creature becoming something else. An elephant growing a pair of wings. You take the DNA from 2 hummingbirds, you put it together, you get more hummingbirds. 2 elephants, you get elephants, not kangaroos. Why? Because of deoxyribonucleic acid. We know that when you do this, there's a coating in that double helix of life, that spiral of life, which is the name of my company, spiral of life. The double helix of life, that coding system is so complex, responsible for all life. Where did that come from? Darwin had no idea of any of this. He had no idea of DNA. DNA wasn't discovered till Watson and Crick in the latter part of the 20th century. I think it was like 1967, right around in that period of time. And Crick was a vexed man because he realized that all the primordial slime and millions of years, no way it's going to create something like this. Let's just think about, I'm breathing right now. My heart is pumping blood. There's oxygen in the room. I'm not wearing a mask. Hallelujah. Right? My eyes can see. I'm speaking. All this is happening automatically. How does that work? How does that work? And how does a reproduction system just magically appear where all the particulars are there in place so a woman can have a child. How does that work? Evolution? I don't think so. We are fearfully and wonderfully made by a loving creator, by the way, who's coming back soon. Wake up, church. Bas relief here. This is a giant. These are little guys. This shows us, in my opinion, that the ancient writings that we read are absolutely true. It's real. Giants did roam the earth. Here's another one, a picture that I took out on the Navajo reservation in New Mexico. See the little guy? See the big guy? It's a petroglyph. I can take you right to that place, providing no one has defaced it. Check this artifact out. There was a 30-pound axe head that was molded, and this gentleman has the actual axe head. Let me see if I can, that's what it looks like. So, give you an idea. So, why would you make an axe head like, oh, it's ceremonial? Anything that doesn't fit into the narrative and the paradigm, it's ceremonial. That's their favorite catchword. Oh, it's a coincidence. Oh, it's ceremonial. No, it's not. It's probably for a guy who was about 10 feet tall. And he used it in a very utilitarian way. Here's the Nephilim lance that we discovered. And this is when it was presented. Bob Shelley actually discovered it and brought it to us. And we thought it was a sword. But Chief Joseph corrected us and said, no, guys, it's not a sword, it's a lance. And we had it analyzed, and the first didn't do the work. Charged me $2,600 and didn't do the work. And said, well, this could have been made in the modern era. Well, a gentleman working at another lab, we gave him a sample, and what he found when he did the analysis of it was that the isotopes come from Greece, England, and Spain. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? So it makes us wonder. It makes us wonder, what are we really looking at here? When we've got this lance that shows that the metal, and by the way, let me back up. This lance was found in Michigan by Bob Shelley at an abandoned campsite. So there's no provenance for it, which is really a bummer. But it came, whoever left it there, it weighs about 28 pounds. And they didn't want to hike it out with it because it's a long way in. They just didn't want to hike with it. So they left it there. Who knows what it is. Shelley finds it. He realizes the importance of it. He brings it back. It's bronze. When the bronze when the metal is analyzed, they discover that the isotopes are from Greece, England, and Spain. What's it doing over here? Does that mean it was carried over here in some sort of a ship? In my opinion, it was. Folks, I'm going to take a break right here, and you take a break, and we'll start part 2 on the Trail of the Nephilim, Mathematical Mysteries of the Mound Builders. And I think you'll find this really interesting.